Shantanu is an agent at the Central Bureau of Investigation. Unable to get any joy from personal relationships, he is always focused on the job. Right now, the CBI is under pressure because of a missing airplane. Flight AO-26 vanished into thin air. The investigation is assigned to Shantanu and his friend, Gaurongo. They are sent to a small village near the Chinese border where a plane crash was reported. An army officer welcomes them to the crash site and summarizes what the rescue team found out. Only the pilot and one passenger survived the crash, as they were inside the cockpit when the aircraft split in two. They are both in critical condition now, so the agents can't question them yet. Gaurongo is suspicious of the surviving passenger, as he had no business being on the flight deck at all. But his hunch will have to wait, because the officer left the biggest surprise for last. This is not the airplane they are looking for. This one is Flight JL-50. It went missing 35 years ago. Further investigation leads the two agents to Professor Sabroto. He is the lucky man who missed Flight JL-50. Shantanu asks him a few questions about that day, but Sabroto begins to grow uncomfortable about that topic. He can't remember where he was going and why he didn't show up at the airport. Then he tries to be funny. He begins to mock the CBI for taking all that time to find a plane. That's when Shantanu reveals the most intriguing detail. Flight JL-50 left Kolkata in 1984, but it only crashed last week. At the hospital, Shantanu is taking a picture of the mysterious passenger's tattoo when Gaurongo comes in with the latest news. A terrorist organization named ABA, Azad Bangla Association, has just claimed Flight AO-26. They demand the immediate release of their leader, Partho Mujamdar. Astonished to hear that, Shantanu shows his partner that picture he's just taken. The man's tattoo is the ABA symbol. When the pilot finally wakes up, she says her name is Bihu Ghosh. That's the original pilot of Flight JL-50, who should be much older by now. Shantanu immediately concludes that the woman is lying and begins an aggressive interrogation about her terrorist affiliations. Bihu keeps saying that she's just a pilot. The last thing she remembers is that her flight was hijacked and she was forced to change the direction of the plane, flying right into a huge storm. Her voice is calm while retelling the traumatic events, but that tranquility is gone when Shantanu says that we're in 2019. She runs to check her reflection in the mirror and looks very relieved to see her normal face. Talking to his superior about that strange interview, Shantanu is sure that the woman is lying. She wasn't even born when JL-50 vanished. In his opinion, this is all ABA. They took this plane and kept it hidden for decades just to confuse the authorities and get more attention on themselves. It might not even be the same aircraft. Everything aboard the flight was extensively documented, and it wouldn't be hard to recreate it all. Gaurongo asks him how the terrorists would coordinate something like that without any tech from the 21st century. Not a single smartphone was found in the plane. Ignoring everything that doesn't fit his own theory, Shantanu decides to find someone who met the real pilot. That's how they end up in this cozy living room with an elderly couple who used to live next door to Bihu Ghosh. They say she was going through a difficult time in 1984. Her boyfriend was killed in action before they could marry, and her pregnancy became evident a few months after that. Combined with her recent loss, the potential scandal was too much for her nerves. Only 3 days before her disappearance, Bihu gave birth to a stillborn. After that sad story is over, the old lady brings a photo album to show the agents. Bihu Ghosh looks exactly the same as the woman Shantanu met at the hospital. But not even that can shake his rational attitude. In fact, he has a whole new theory now. That baby was not stillborn. Bihu had to lie to avoid social complications. Then she went missing, and the ABA found the child. Now they're using her to impersonate her mother. Gaurongo listens to that theory and wisely keeps his opinion to himself. It seems like the rational explanation is not much easier to believe than the supernatural version. Deciding to work from a new angle, Shantanu visits Partho Mujamdar in jail. He might be released soon as a result of negotiations with ABA and their promise to return the AO-26 passengers. The terrorist seems to be counting on that outcome, but his defiant attitude changes when the agent mentions the other flight. Mojumdar clearly knows something about what happened in 84, but he's not talking. At the CBI, Gorongo finally has a lucky break after hours studying and cross-checking names on the passenger list. One of them is Biswajit Chandra Mitra, a physicist at the Kolkata Science Center. Professor Mitra was a suspect in a terrorism investigation, and there is reason to believe that he was somehow connected to ABA. The agents make up an excuse to visit Mitra's son. Going through some old papers, Shantanu finds an airplane blueprint and several other documents that look extremely suspicious. Even more shocking than that is the picture of Professor Mitra. He looks exactly like the second survivor, the one with the ABA tattoo. Speaking of the devil, that man is wide awake now. His behavior is extremely weird. When he finds out that the pilot also survived, he immediately attacks her. Luckily, the agents are coming down the hallway at the same time, forcing him to let her go. Using a nurse as a human shield, the man hijacks an ambulance and escapes. Losing another lead, Shantanu decides to learn more about Professor Mitra at the Science Center. One of his former colleagues says that he was obsessed with the mysterious Project A, a collection of ancient documents that were partially intact. It was once believed that they contained the secret to time travel, but nobody was able to complete the equations and test the wild theory. The project was shut down, but 2 people kept working on it, Professor Mitra and his assistant, Subroto. Shantanu has no choice but to confront the old man. Professor Subroto apologizes for his lies and confesses his involvement. He used to work with Mitra on the equations, but he never believed that they would enable actual time travel. One day, Mitra euphorically announced that he had completed the calculations. They were the coordinates of a wormhole. As the precise location could only be reached by an aircraft, Mitra turned to his terrorist friends. Mojumdar sent a couple of his men to help him hijack Flight JL-50. Young Subroto was horrified at the whole thing, but he couldn't just tell that madman that he wanted out, especially when he knew too much already. So he bought the ticket and hoped for the worst. The plane was supposed to travel 35 hours into the future. When that period was over and nothing happened, Subroto concluded that his prayers were heard and his evil boss was gone forever. He kept living in that blissful ignorance until 2 weeks ago, when Shantanu's visit revived his old fears. Then, last night, Mitra himself knocked on his door. To Subroto's horror, the man is exactly the same as he was in the 80s, and not only physically. Mitra is still a psycho, and now he's planning to share his discoveries with Mojumdar as soon as he's out of jail. Shantanu remains skeptical, but agrees to listen to Subroto's plan. He wants to travel back to 1984. Stopping the terrorists before JL-50 takes off seems to be the only way to defeat them without putting anyone else in danger. Which brings us to the only person who can find the wormhole. Bihu Ghosh agrees to help them, but only if she's the one to fly them there. Gorongo uses his CBI contacts to borrow a plane and begs his partner not to crash it. After they take off, Subroto begins to explain their tight schedule. They need to act before 4:30 p.m., which was when JL-50 entered the wormhole. Failing to prevent that will cause no change to 2019. But if they succeed, everything will be at their right place at exactly 4:30. They won't even remember each other. Approaching the wormhole coordinates, the plane begins to shake violently. The most bizarre sounds are heard before a sudden blackout. The plane lands in a remote area. Shantanu is convinced that the crazy plan has failed, and now he regrets having let things get this far. But when they hitchhike to the city, the news on the radio is about Indira Gandhi's recent actions, despite the fact that he's been dead for decades. Shantanu can't keep fighting the truth anymore. When they arrive at the city, its name is still Calcutta. The trio gets a room for the night, as the D-Day is only tomorrow. But then, Shantanu suddenly realizes what day it is today. Excusing himself for a moment, he runs a few blocks until reaching a specific building, where he hides and waits. A few moments later, a car pulls over near the building. A man comes out and leaves the baby at the door. That building is the orphanage where Shantanu grew up, and he is watching himself as a baby now. Trying to overcome emotion, he approaches the man to ask why he is abandoning that child, but the man refuses to talk to him and drives off. Now, Shantanu is devastated. This was his only chance to fix his lifelong issues, and he missed it. So, he gets back to work in the morning, as he always does. But this time trip still has one more surprise for him. In order to ambush the terrorists, they'll need to drive to their hideout. Bihu suggests stealing her own car. While she sneaks into the house, carefully avoiding her past self, Shantanu is almost paralyzed when he sees her car. It is the same car he saw last night. The man he met was Bihu's father. He lied to her about her baby and took it to the orphanage. As they drive to the hideout, Shantanu can barely hide his amazement to realize that he's sitting next to his own mother. He asks her if she saw the baby, but she's a bit weirded out that he knows so much about her. At the abandoned warehouse, she waits in the car while the other two go in. Taking down Mitra and Mojumdar is easier than expected, but just when Shantanu is about to destroy the papers containing the infamous equations, Subroto stops him. It turns out that he never intended to save lives. He wants that knowledge for himself. Shantanu reminds him that reality will reset in a few minutes anyway, and they won't even be here. But young Subroto is about to arrive. He will grab those papers and use the discovery to build a much better life. Shantanu refuses to let that happen, and they begin to fire at each other. Subroto gets killed, and the papers are destroyed. Shantanu still tries to get to Bihu, but that's when the clock hits 4:30, and he blacks out. He wakes up in 2019. This is Flight AO26, and it lands in Kolkata on time. A much older Bihu is waiting for him at that same orphanage. It's their annual celebration. 30 years ago, she found out what really happened and came here to take him home. And that's a wrap. Make sure to check out more of our sci-fi recaps. Thank you for watching.